Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight, I have from the Great Midwest, somewhere in Verde, Arizona, RDV from the Great Midwest, as we like to say. And I have to sit there and tell you, RDV, tonight we have a very, very special Shat on You, Shatner kind of specific thing we're doing here on the Extreme Movie Show because we're covering Kingdom of the Spiders, a made for TV movie from 1977, starring him and kind of one guy we might have heard and really nobody else, in a period piece that I am going to take and defend this position that this is the greatest spider movie of all time. Let me repeat myself. The greatest spider movie of all time. And we'll get into that. But my initial thoughts about this movie is as a kid watching this growing up, there was a lot of really, really good writing and shows and even movies on television back in the 70s, and it kind of petered out. And you and I have covered Kolchak the Night Stalker every
Yeah.
episode, just like Professor Brooks and I have done Twin Peaks and some other shows, did James Bond movies and such here. But for William Shatner, we of course think of him as Captain Kirk, but you and I take a little bit of a bent where anybody could do Star Trek. We said no, let's cover his dark period in the 70s where he was just struggling to find any sort of work and doing things. And we covered Impulse, filmed here in Central Florida, where he plays a gigolo killing people. It's a tremendous, weird film. Then there's this one, which is a little bit more mainstream, which just catches a little bit of Americana as what it'd be like back in the time. It's
Mhm.
one of those brainless kind of films that you watch. But I tell you, I have to sit there and say, despite the overly, should be very obvious environmental messaging in here that runs through a lot of science fiction films, whether it's giant monsters, King Kong,
Yeah.
Godzilla, and animals, when animals attack. They don't really get into it too much and beat you over the head. It's just a campy little film. But I tell you, because it's all practical effects with tens of thousands of real life tarantulas in it, it's Shatner carrying everything, and it's a bunch of normal people, which we'll get into why it was like that. I think this is a little bit of a gem of a film. Practical effects. It's creepy, and I will say this: while I think Arachnophobia is a close number two, Arachnophobia had some real life spiders and some, I think, CGI. But I'm telling you, in this movie, they're all authentic. So watching them, even though you
Yeah.
don't get to see them a lot, when you do at the end, they save it all for the final act. This is a friggin' home run. What a great little movie. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but we've talked about this at nauseum
Mhm.
here about doing. What's your take on this film?
This was my first time watching this because I just can't handle too much Shatner all at once. You got to watch it in like moderation.
Okay.
Shat, uh, Shatner being the person that didn't even want to do this film in the first place. I was because I'm watching that riff tracks, so I'll admit that. The YouTube version I didn't like the quality, so I was like, it's on Amazon Prime for free. I can watch that, and then I love Amazon gives you so much trivia. So watching this movie, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that the guys were joking about. It was kind of what I was thinking too. Was watching this. It's what year are we living in this movie? It's supposed to be 70s. We got these farmers in here. Uh, uh, uh the late great Walter Colby is played by what's his name? Oh,
Woody Strode.
Woody Strode. Yeah, and then he got his wife in here, who's actually Sammy Davis Jr.'s widow
Hmm.
here too. And like they're on a farm. I'm thinking like the way they're dressed. I was like, what year is this? I mean, this looks like they just got after slavery ended. Like, what? This is prohibition. What is it? What year is this?
Well, it
The,
seems a little backwater in that, you're right, because it's not a podunk town, but it's just a very small town in a rural area. And
yeah,
and back 50 years ago, you still had a lot of it, and you still have some of it today, actually. So it's weird that by this time we're seeing big budget films like Jaws and all that, and we think things are a bit more middle class and mainstream. But there's still a big chunk of America that was like this, and really it was the appropriate setting for what they were trying to do.
yeah. So yeah, so he's called in because Dr. Robert Rack Hansen. You have no at this point in the movie, you have no idea why, but everybody calls him Rack. And they're like, what?
Because he wears the tight 70s pants, and you can see a big set down there of balls. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the way he's hitting on every single woman that moves in town, constantly drinking beer. Yeah, this guy, and then he. So, anyways, he goes into he's called in because he's yes, Shatner is the veterinarian. Yes, and he's called in because the prize calf, gets attacked by a low moving camera.
But it's a good
in.
shot, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a good shot. It creeps you out, and the score is phenomenal. The score really helps make this film.
Yes, it does. And yeah, well, and that's the thing. You bring up the score. Did you know that the score was actually like where did I see that? The score was actually made up of like leftover like music or sound bites from the Twilight Zone.
Yes, and if you watch Twilight Zone, particularly the piano piece that you hear a lot, that I mean, that's clearly from that. I mean, you can tell. One thing I wanted to say about this film, as people are starting to pile in here, as we go through some scenes and some observations here, is I wanted to present this to you because you and I on Tuesday nights usually talk about 80s films, action films, and we branch out a little bit, but we try to talk a little bit about some of the themes that we have and just in general. And I mentioned before how a less is more approach to me can be more effective, because when I think of like spider movies, I go, am I really scared or am I having fun because it's kind of campy and cute? But in here, because like I say, you don't see the spiders, you see them a little bit at the beginning, just enough to know they're there. So you're always thinking about them while this stuff goes on. And so whether it's intentional or not, I think the genius of this movie is that it gives you a simple structure where you get introduced to the characters that you're going to see from the beginning to the end. You see what's going on in their life, like you mentioned, the farmers who we see enough of, and their livestock, and their little girl, and Rack's dead brother's hot wife that we'll get into.
Yes.
Because we get the setup for it, so we expect things to pick up right. But what happens here, which is sheer genius, is in the second act, it comes to a complete friggin' crawl. I mean, a spider's going to move faster than the plot in here, and we're left watching Shatner and his obvious gloriousness trying to work two different women who keep shutting him down, talking stuff about women's lib, until he just manhandles them and they go to make sweet, sweet love to him, or at least promise it, because we never get any action. It's quite a phenomenal subplot to me.
Actually, he gets shut down by the first woman. The other woman is is the widow of his brother.
Yep.
And she goes to kiss him, like they're tackling up, and then he's like, I don't want to do this, because they're fooling around. Like you see, the first shot you see of Shatner, him and the girl are running around, and like they're riding the horses, and he's roping a cow, a little calf and stuff, and then then he goes and he sees her and he starts flirting with her. He's like, I'm gonna get you too, and she's like, oh no. I'm like, where are we going with this, Shatner? Are you just tying a woman up? And then
it's slight flirtation.
Yeah, they fall down, and then he's like, she goes to kiss him, and then it got to the point where, hold on a second, I got people talking behind me.
Yep. So she calls him not his name, and then he gets kind of pissy with her and all that, and then she feels kind of bad. I'm like, well, he got it right. We don't know what's going on at this point, because as a woman, you kind of screw up when you call a guy another person's name, because that's the old line people used to talk about back in the day. There's, when you're making sweet, sweet love to your woman, there's really four people in the room. There's you, there's her, there's who you're thinking of, and there's who she's thinking of. And you just don't want to be rude and while you're doing it and say the person's name.
Yeah, it is weird. He comes off of a very today would be a chauvinistic pig in this movie. I was like, oh my God. And it's like over the top Shatner. He's like, dude, I know that you think you're good looking and stuff there, but like you're just going after. And then so in this movie, we do that, and then we go he's called in by they'll go look at the calf. The calf is laying on that thing. He's like, well, let me go do some tests. It's like,
we see Shatnering up the doctor room.
Yes. he's like, I'll be right back. He's like, he puts the con swab, and he's like, oh, here's the problem. It's a con swab. I have no idea. Your cow's dead.
That's true.
Literally, it's like he doesn't do much doctor stuff at all. And then he's like, oh. Then the next thing we see, we're introduced to what's her name? It's gonna be Ashley. Tiffany Bowling. She's at the lab. She's an anorexologist who's coming in. Basically, because she's from Flagstaff. And she's basically like, it was got these like, she's like, well, why don't you know? It's like, hey, everything was, these cows and stuff, they're killed by venom. He's like, venom, whatever. But before they even talk about that, we're at this gas station from the 1920s.
There's a lot of gas stations like that, though. I remember them as a kid.
I'm
telling you,
I'm just laughing my ass.
just like rotary phones, a lot of gas stations like
Yeah.
that. There were still some that were full service, so people would come out, run out to your car, and do all that stuff,
Yeah.
even in the 70s.
Yep. So I'm just laughing because like, you look at the guy who's got there is he's like, because the one guy, he's got like El Camino or something. He's got chickens and he's got a cow in the back. He's going. I'm just thinking he's walking up to the back and he's got the cow in there. He's like, oh, he's like, hey, I need help over here. I'm like, what's wrong? I'm thinking like, because look at this guy. This guy's got a cow in the back of his car. He's got a flat tire. The riff tracks. Let's just love it because they're like, seems to be a problem. You got a cow in the back of your car. That's why you get a flat tire. The guy's like, but no, I'll give you a flat tire for $18. Remember, $18 is a lot of money back then. And the guy's like, oh, all I got is a $5. He's like, well, $18. He's like, well, I'll just. The old guy start driving. He's like, dang it. So the gas station's like, I'll get you a tower out of my shack that's covered in spider webs. Dun dun dun. He's like, oh, this one will do. And, we got bit. Yeah. It's like,
she's hot.
It's just like
she's like big city girl hot.
Yeah.
Whereas his dead brother's a widow is like country hot.
Yeah. So she pulls up after Shatner is already in there, and then she mistakes him for the gas station attendant. So she's like, "Oh, where's the bathroom?" It's like, well, the women's room is out of order. So she points around to the men's room, and then comes like, "Well, what's going on?" He's like, "Oh," he's like, "I sent her to the men's room." He's like, "What? What do you mean the men's room?" I'm thinking like, dude, you run the gas station. Don't you know what's going on with your gas station as far as what's out of service, what is in service? But yeah. So later on, after this, he basically Shatner goes back to his veterinarian location right there, and he's on the phone again arguing. But all you see is the sheriff, so you don't know if this guy is a ventriloquist or what, because you don't even see Shatner whatsoever. And then Shatner finally comes out. He's got a 6-pack of beer, and he hands it to the sheriff, and then the mayor comes. He's like, "Hey, you want a beer?" He's like, "Yeah, thanks." Get the festival coming up, the little fair, and it's basically like, at this point it's like Jaws. So do we got a quarantine or not? I got a whole fair coming up this week. It's like,
no, it's tough because you're going, oh my god, really? But like I said, the cool thing about it is Shatner's like he's the best of the worst in this town, if you think about it. And these aren't bad people. It's not like they're scumbags, but the setup, of course, is exactly like you said. It's a ripoff of Jaws. They've got the big festival coming up in a couple weeks, so the mayor wants to make sure that they don't have to go into quarantine for some outbreak that they haven't identified yet. And things move a lot slower back then, with technology. If we're talking 50 years ago, this is several lifetimes ago, 2 generations, if you please. But for me, we see Shatner and her go back and forth, and it's weird because what disturbs me is, he's trying to like mac on her, and he's doing it in a kind of innocent sort of way, and she rebuffs him, but then he like runs her off the road, and then he physically picks her up, puts her in the car, in the passenger seat, her convertible Mercedes, and then drives off to some little podunk place so he can order a glass of beer while she sits there, and then all of a sudden she just decides she likes it.
Yeah,
and she's like so hot, you like figure she's got somebody. She's like, well, nobody's watching me right now. And then she makes comments to him that are very sexist. If I was a woman, I'd be offended. They're out on a little play date with his niece, and she's like, "You like being taken care of?" Because she's handing him a beer, and I'm like, "You guys haven't even done it. And you're acting like you've been married 5 years." I mean, it's kind of creepy.
It is creepy in a sense. I mean, like he literally kidnapped a woman, and then she's like, "Oh, we're gonna have dinner," and then she's like, she's still kind of angry, but then she kind of flirts with him back, and then it's like she goes back. So I think she goes back to her apartment beforehand, and she takes a shower, and you get a little side boob in here. The only thing you're gonna get in this movie, and you see a spider crawling up, and it goes into her little dresser drawer, and then instead of being freaked out, she was like, "Oh, what are you doing in here?" Pick it up. It's one of the deadly spiders that they have. the movie. They're all tarantulas. But yeah, this movie it was so weird because this movie is supposed to be a horror movie, but then it became like an environmental movie because you're spraying the crops, killing all the other source of food. So the spiders magically grew in size. Oh, not really size, but I mean like they
It's,
grew.
you
They
know,
got
the whole thing with that is the DDT, right?
yeah.
It's, I'll just say this because, you know, it's relevant to the point. They don't beat you over the head with it, but there's two sides of the story, and without us picking either side or really investigating it too much, just simply say this: a lot of the movies from the '50s on were, you know, man sucks or man versus nature, and it's man's folly to try to compete, which produces some interesting results. You know, yeah, like I always go back to Godzilla as a baseline because that should be obvious to anybody about nuclear war. But then in the United States, they did that kind of like with these movies. You know, The Blob. They did it with, you know, not just monster movies that scare you as a kid, but as an adult, they would take things and exaggerate it. The Food of the Gods was a driving classic movie of the '70s as well. But for this, with DDT, the idea was is that, and again, we're talking farms. It was, you know, 50 to 75 years ago, half of people were living on farms or in rural countries. I mean, suburbs that we've lived in for generations are a relatively new thing. Most people 100 years ago were living on farms or close by, not necessarily in big cities. It was like a big mix, right? So you have this chemical that gets discovered in work that kills a lot of things, particularly mosquitoes, called DDT. And so this was used, and some people in the camp that like it claim that doesn't really kill humans. You have to ingest 10 times the amount that might even have an effect on you before it does any long-term damage like cancer. This is before they kind of knew
Yeah.
smoking was really bad. And it pretty much wiped out malaria, which was a big deal, especially if you live in tropical regions. Well, the other camp, the environmental camp, would sit there and say, no, I think it was the bald eagle back in the '60s was endangered. And once DDT came out here, you know, somewhere up in the New England area, a bunch of birds died. And then which ones lived, if they produced eggs, the eggshells would be really thin and led to a lot of stuff. And it was really one of the very first prolific visual, you know, out argued about cases for a very long time about big companies and if they hide results of tests versus the government and all that too, and the whole environmental movement. It's very significant, and a lot of people fall into the camp of DDT bad, you know, must get rid of it. Some are like, no, there's no proof the science
Mm-hmm.
is bad, and you know, things are like that today with
Yeah.
other topics. But it gets mentioned in this movie. She's the one that presents that off. She's the one that talks about being feminist, for lack of a better word, and she's not a bad character. She's very competent. She knows her role. She's pretty strong, but
Well,
nobody can resist William Shatner.
when you first see her pulled in, like, you know, after the gas station thing, he sends her to the hotel, the lodge stuff, and she just the way she dresses like she's coming from like California.
Studio 54. Anybody?
Right? She's did Atlantic Cook. She's here. She's driving her Benz convertible.
It's a nice car.
Yeah, it is a nice car though. I'll not deny that, but it's an expensive car. Yeah. So this movie was like, it was not like what I expected it to be. It was, they say low budget. It's $1 million. Back then, I'm thinking like today would be low budget. Back then, I don't know if that'd be low budget, but
Yeah,
he walked away with 17 million.
No, it did very well.
Yeah,
That's the thing. People,
and I think it was because
that.
they used real spiders. Yes, they paid people $10 a spider, so people went and got 5,000 of them. So they ended up paying $50,000 out of their own studio budget just for real spiders, and they had spiders crawling everywhere. And they said like the spiders, they had to like keep them in separate cages, and they had to like keep them like warm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. With, living things like that.
And then so basically the Montreal just kept on hand. It led to some usual product production difficulties. Not only they keep them warm, but because they're acting as cannibalistic tendencies, all 5,000 of them had to be kept separate containers. Additionally, tarantulas were used shy around people, so they had to use fans and air tubes often to them even move toward their victims.
Yeah, and I'll say this, you know, as we get towards the end here, because I want to talk about this final act, I think it's tremendous, is that when I mentioned earlier before about practical effects, that meant mostly, a lot of live spiders. And yeah, there's some fake ones in there too, but I don't know that you would see a movie where they would choose to do it like that. And even though the camera shots, this is like, of course, before ET, but you mentioned Jaws earlier, which I think is good. You're getting the perspective from the killer, and this was relatively new, actually, in film. I mean, there was a shot or two, I think, in a movie called Eyes of Laura Mars, and then John Carpenter used it in Halloween from Michael Myers. And so to see this low camera moving up to a cow, let's say in the field with the music, it's so simple, but it's effective. And you don't have to overdo it and try to have the perfect music, the perfect camera shot. As long as you got the right combination, the execution is what's important. And that's a lot of the little touches in this movie are like that.
Hmm.
There's good looking people in here, but they're not super hot where you go, oh, I recognize them from here. And you get that sense of
Yep.
disbelief. It's shot on location in some really, really small town. It feels like it when you're there. Yeah, it's a 70s movie, so you've
Yeah.
got some cultural things in there. But the thing is, by the time this third act hits in this movie, they say, okay, we're going to show you everything. But up to this point, all you keep thinking about is where are the spiders going to come from and how many? Because you
Oh,
see the spider hill,
well,
and then
yeah,
they
and
burn it, and then you
yeah,
find out there's like 30 or 40 more
yeah,
hidden to all the spiders in the hill.
Because Colby's dog is killed, and then they find out what the dog was, and they look. Here's a big old spider nest, and here Colby knew the whole entire time. They didn't tell him, like, thanks, Colby.
Well,
It's a giant hill with like 50 to 60 spiders just crawling out of it. I'm
we
thinking,
said he
like,
found it that morning while he was looking for his dog, and
yeah,
so that's when they ran into
I
the
know,
dog.
but it's just like they're gonna go burn it. It's like he's like because they finally decided let's just go burn whatever it is, and look for a nest to burn it, and then they find because they found it the night before. She took a spider, took it home, got the venom. It has way more than a normal tarantula should have because they're like food supports. They've basically evolved. They're angry. They're going for bigger crops. So and like if they could take down a bull, here's a bull runs out, and they're so it's like the bulls got spiders on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about that with the third act. So basically what happens is, like I said, we meet a few people, we follow them around, we see what the plot is. It really drags to a crawl, and then it springs into action. It
Yeah,
does go from 0 to 100. Because this is the movie when I say it's simple, but it's smart. Like I say, you meet some of the locations, like you mentioned the
yeah,
gas station earlier.
yep,
We've seen the bar that people are going to end up in the final act. Because what happens is you have some side characters that you don't see too much, but some of them don't make it at the very end because all of a sudden once they realize there's a whole bunch more of them, the theory is
yeah.
that they become aggressive, and then all of a sudden they start getting reports about people missing. We see
The
Colby driving away to go to the doctors in the big
Yep.
town, and they all crawl all over him, and he crashes. And then we start seeing stuff like that happen. And what's really cool is all of a sudden, everybody in this small inner circle that we've come to know, at least a little bit, they
Yeah,
all branch off to go grab him to go meet back at the cabin.
yeah.
And
The mayor wanted the guy to use a crop duster plane.
yeah, to poison them all, and they were going to do it. But when he went to do that, we see them crawl all over the guy while he's flying.
His
And
scream.
it sounds silly, and he screams like a little girl, but those are real spiders crawling over him while
I know.
somebody's flying a plane and capturing it, and it's up close, right? And it's a nice long take. It's cool. And what does he do?
The thing is, though,
He crashes into the gas station that we've seen. So
the
we're
bad thing is,
familiar with
though,
the town already. Yeah.
the bad thing is that he wasn't holding the joystick. He was screaming his hands in the air for about at least good to 5 minutes, and then he finally crashes. Like that plane would have crashed earlier than that.
It's a movie. They had to extend some things out.
I
But
know.
once you have that crash, it's beautiful because basically all these spiders, which are pretty shy, and since they're cannibals, they would normally have their
Yeah.
own territory and stay away from each other. It's like an army of them. They start to take over the town, and they all run back to the cabin. They get their little niece. That there's a couple that travels around the country that's in there. You start seeing them everywhere, and there's just some really nice visuals of like them trying to gather everybody together and running to the cabin, and you see them, all these spiders everywhere. They're on the doors, they're on the steps, they're on the plants, they're on the windows. They're boarding up the windows and doors, trying to get ready together, and then they're in other rooms, so they're coming into
Yeah.
the house, they're
Yeah.
attacking them. And it's silly because they don't move fast, but
Well,
they're
and
overwhelming them by numbers.
and also the spiders are running away. They're crawling away from them. They're not
Yep.
crawling towards them. Cool thing about the plane crash thing, there was no stunt doubles. They actually had like a few extras, and that main cast was there, like Shatner stuff when the plane actually went down.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's how low budget it was.
but that's cool, and it felt real, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't some like
Uh,
CGI explosion or anything.
yeah. Yeah, and so okay, yeah, so everybody, the whole town's, they're inside, they're pull themselves inside the lodge there, the main lodge, and then the spiders are crawling into the stove vent, and she's freaking out. She throws the hot water with the stew, and then she's like and she screams, and then like uh you see Shatner comes in, and he's like, oh no, he goes to grab the pot. Oh, it's I hurt burned myself because it's on the ground. It's like Shatner got bit 3 or 4 times in here, but somehow didn't die from the venom until the very
Well, they
last
said
one.
get such and such because it'll neutralize it.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
there.
know, no, but is he every single time you see him, he goes, "Ow, son of a bitch!" It's like you look like, it's
I know. I
like,
know.
it's like I was loving the riff track. He's like Shatner, stronger than any venom.
They can smell the Shatner sauce, and so they don't bite them, I guess.
They don't, at least there is venom. So, but yeah, like, so then they retreat to the other room after trying to the spider. Actually, that's what it is. She says, get a fire extinguisher. It has the chemical of it's repellent. I'm like, they're like, oh yes, yes. It's like then so they're in there boarding up the windows because also the power goes out, and Shatner's with the flashlight, and he's like, oh crap, and I love it because every time like he'd go pick up the fire extinguisher, and the guy's rip track is like, yes, you're saved now. Everyone else is dead now. It's like you have the magic, and like you see, because they always say it's like he's trying. There's a scene in there where he's goes to go in the basement to
Change
put
the
the
fuse.
fuse box,
Hmm.
and Shatner's down there. There's spiders crawling. He's throwing them off his side. He's spraying, and then he tries spraying his legs down, get the spiders off his leg. He's like, oh, shit. I'm just thinking like, boy, that fire extinguisher is doing jack shit for you.
Well, this is the scene because not only is there a great many deal of spiders, the cool part about it here is not him crawling up with tons of spiders on him, which looks great because they're real. It's the fact that when the lights come back on, because he's able to replace
Oh,
the fuse,
they're on the
they're
light.
all over the light bulb.
It
And again,
explodes.
if you're older and incandescent bulbs have been intentionally phased out of mass production in favor of LEDs, whether you agree with that or not. But
Yeah,
when you see those like 6 or 7 spiders all over the light bulb, it's cool. And if you look, they start smoking because those
because
things
they're
get
burning. Yeah.
super hot and they're
Yep.
burning, and then the thing pops. I'm like, that's disgusting, but that's a great little visual. As well as
Yeah.
him taking a minute to crawl up. And then
Oh
there's
God,
the
help
infamous scene is
me!
him coming out and he's got the one on his face as he falls down.
And he's like, oh, this is laughing because it looks so fake. The boils on, and then, yeah, it's just like before they had rescued his niece
Hmm.
from and because the mother was like she ran outside. She's like, honey, come inside for dinner. He's like, oh hell no. She goes out there with a broom. There's like 30 spiders under the girl who's just happily swinging on her swing outside the tree. Doesn't happen to look down. And the mom runs, and the spiders and she falls over because she's all covered in spiders. She dies. And when Shatner got there, he's like, he got out of the truck. He's with Ashley's with him too. Like and he closes his door. He runs over there and grabs the girl. She's screaming inside the house. She's on top of the table. He kicks the spiders away,
Hmm.
and then they go back the door. And the rip tracks. It's like he's like, damn it, woman! Why didn't you close your door? There's spiders everywhere now. Looking inside the truck.
They'd get in anyway. Yeah.
I know, but it's like, so. Speaking of that, so go the sheriff rolls up in his truck to the cottage while everybody's held up in there later on, and you just see the crunch, 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 squish because he's actually running over real spiders. I
You
was
can see
like,
the squishy stuff too.
that's so gross. He's just kicking him away from him.
But all these things add up, and I will say this: one of the best sequences in there, and I think it's underrated because we talk about, yes, it's a movie, yes, there's rubber spiders, but there's a ton of real ones. what little budget they had left, they put it all in like the last couple minutes here because, like I say, it's the last 10-15 in this movie. It feels hectic and frenetic, and it doesn't stop or pause or let up. You get a shot of the assistant cop there who, interestingly enough, used to fool around with the lodge lady who's now older.
You know what it is, right? It's David McLean, the Virginian.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
He's also the Marble Man.
Okay, so he's driving out of town to go get help from the big city because their phone lines are down, and of course he gets overwhelmed by the mob in town. And this is such a great scene because there's panic everywhere. There's bodies all over the streets. They're wrapped up in cocoons and tons of fake blood and all these spider webs, and they overwhelm him in his car, and he hits the water tower, which lands on him and kills him. And it's just phenomenal. I thought, back in the day, you would kill to say, yeah, I'd love to be not a stunt double, but like an extra in a film like this, where I can run up to a cop car with a spider attached to my face and say, see, yeah, I was in the movie, and that's me. It just seems like fun, but it's a great action piece. And combined with the music, it's great because you can't do this the entire way through the movie. Arachnophobia is a great movie. Love it a lot. But it doesn't, and I have to say this in all seriousness, and I want to ask you about this. I know you watched the riff track, so maybe your opinion's skewed. I don't know. But for me, as a kid, this movie was terrifying. There's been a few others, but not many. When I see Arachnophobia or like Eight-Legged Freaks, which is a lot of fun, at no point am I ever scared. Here, I just think the sum total of the fact it's low budget, you see a lot of them on the screen doing stuff. I'm not saying their behavior is realistic, but you can easily picture in situations where they're going to be. Like you mentioned, the guy, we get this scene at the gas station on who goes to get the tire for his customer, and he's rubbing his hand through it to make sure there's nothing in there, it's the right fit. And we know he gets bit in there, but we don't see it. But it's like we can imagine sticking our hand in something and getting that sharp pain. We can feel that, right? Or just, if you've seen spiders or creepy crawlies, going through the grass, or, if you see them in your house, it's not pleasant. And so I just think there's something primal about something like that, that just the way they move in the background. If you watch one and it has nothing to do with the scene and you still see it moving, like the little girl standing on top of her bed with all those real spiders, that's cool. I give the little girl credit for being willing to do that. And that was a part of their whole casting process, to your point. They could interview and say, hey, you look right for the part, but here, hold a spider. And they would be like, oh, fuck no. And you're like, okay, next. And I like that. It's powerful. It adds up. And so that's why I say it's simple, but it's effective, because the very last scene is super cynical, and it was led up for a sequel. They somehow, after boarding up all the windows and go through all this stuff, managed to survive the night. They're trying to get the old transistor radio to work to pick up the signal from the big city town. And he goes to open up the windows. He takes off a wooden plank or two, and he looks out and he's like, oh my God, sweet Jesus. Everybody walks up to look around, and you just see the 6 a.m. morning light when it's a nice sunny 62, not a cloud on the sky, according to the radio. And the very, very last shot is this pull away from the direct center of town, looking up to the lodge, all the way around, covered in spider webs. And it was intentionally left open for a sequel, which Canon, our favorite movie franchise, the Canon Classics we like to talk about a lot, has been in talks about remaking it for a long time. It's just never occurred. But that's it. You roll credits. Movie over.
It never got made because Terry Bowling bitch that she wasn't invited to the sequel.
Yeah, well, go do some more cocaine, woman.
Well, she'd already done Playboy before this.
Yep. She's a good-looking woman. No doubt about it.
Her mother was in there. Her mother was the operator, the one that was covering spiders.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like these, there's a lot of people in here. It was kind of cool. Marcy Lafferty actually went. I don't know if the time she was married to Shatner. I think she might have been, but there's so many things that came out. Like Tiffany Bowling said years later that that Shatner was actually trying to get with her in front of his wife. For real.
Well, he's a player, and
then again, like I don't know if that's true or not, because maybe she was a small time actress, she didn't do much. Her career was pretty much over after this. Yeah. So and then Emma Washburn, she's the one that's dressed like Robin Williams from Mork and Mindy.
Mm-hmm.
she's she's in the overalls in there. She's the one's freaking out with her husband who was trying to buy Tiffany a drink early in the movie at the lodge.
Yeah.
She actually went on to appear on Night. Was it Coach Hawker, Coach Hack the Night Stalker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's and the Roy Angle who plays the mayor. This was his last movie.
It's a piece of movie. When you go back, like I say, almost 50 years and watch it, it's one of those little gems where it's entertaining. It's Shatner. It's not really anything more than what it is, but it works. And a lot of times you might get something you're like, it's okay. But this movie just is somewhat memorable. And there's a few other movies like that. We've always debated about which creature films to do and when to do them. And there's another one that we may be doing at some point here the next time we do a spider movie. But this one, we wanted to get Shatner on board because it's been a while. And this is one we've talked about forever. So I'm glad we're talking about it here. But I just would say from my final thoughts that it's watchable. It's fun. As you said, the Rift Tracks version is on Amazon. Obviously, it's on YouTube for free. Nothing edited out of it, too. It did get a Blu-ray release because it is a cult film. I mean, there are people that seek this out. And some people might throw it under the horror category, even though it's kind of a B-level type film. But it's not an action movie by any means. Like I say, it's slow, then it's very slow, and then it's chaotic at the end, and it's fun. It's underrated, and I do put it up there as one of the best horror or spider movies of all time. Not horror, but spider. Yeah. I just, like I say, due to the practical effects and the stunts that we get, and all the stuff that you and I like, whether it's this kind of movie or like a Chuck Norris film, how we talk about all those kinds of things. So I think it's a must-watch for anybody that likes this kind of stuff. I think it's way up there too. So, what kind of final thoughts do you have?
Well, I was a little trivia here. Both Svensson was actually offered the lead role, but he turned it down. Shatner didn't want to do the movie, but the director actually talked him into it. And there's a scene in here when everybody's being attacked in the city. Mm-hmm. One of the kids gets covered in spiders. That's actually the director's son.
Oh, yeah. You see kids covered here. This is not family.
Yeah. Oh, it's just, so you kind of lean over, but when you have the sheriff is driving through the town and everybody's just screaming, everybody's trying to get on. You see people covered in spiders. They're dead, in cocoons. And then he's at, you see this car come out of nowhere, starts driving. It speeds up, stops, hits the brakes, then speeds up again, hits the mayor. It's like it was a goof. They weren't supposed to do that, but they run over. The mayor gets run over, hit by a car, and then that car crashes into the water tower. Water tower falls over and smashes the cop car, and you see the sheriff outside, bloody and covered in spiders. And it's like, is this? Yeah. After that, but this is really the creepy thing. So those who live in Arizona or Camp Verde around that area, after the shooting, any tarantulas that are still alive in the area were set loose for many years. They saw a higher than unusual number of them in that area. But don't worry though, they're not they can't kill you. Their venom's not strong enough.
Yeah.
Also, producer Igor Cantor in his 1990 Fangora. I don't know that it's even a movie or a magazine anymore.
Fangora is a magazine. Yep.
Is it still okay? He said that there's a lot of similarities to the Spielberg movie, which he feels like you can't sue Spielberg. He's money.
Yeah, I agree. Without this movie, you don't have arachnophobia.
Yeah. But it's just so another thing is that Shatner said he's still in his if you go read his autobiography, I'm sure he has more than one now, but he said at the time he is just so disturbed because you just hear squish, squish, squish. He's just all the spiders that were killed, and he's not. I guess he's just. I mean, whether repeat or not, I'm just like, ugh, really, ugh, gross. Just because they're not like normal spider. This is like juicy, sticky to your foot. Ugh. But this right in this movie though. It was very, very Shatner. I think Shatner did more overacting than anybody else. I think he's for the only one that was trying to act. So he actually had to do more to sell it more. And I just loved it how he was so condescending and sexist towards this woman, and then kidnaps her, and it's like, who wrote this movie? Because I guess back then it was acceptable.
I didn't
But
think he was condescending or sexist at all. It's just, hey, you're a pretty woman. It's just
I'm
like
drinking a yeah.
it's like Champ, from Anchorman. Hey, you, me, maybe get some chicken, maybe have some sex. It's nothing like he's trying
He's
to be a
flirting with
jerk.
flirting
He's
with
just like being honest.
the first scene when he goes over to his the widow, like his brother is a widow.
Yep.
She's kid. She runs up. She's like, "Come on, let's go!" And he's like, and he pinches the little girl's butt and she runs away. And it's like, did he just really just goose her?
I don't recall that, but I'm glad you're watching that because I didn't see that.
I didn't see it first. I had to rewind because I heard the guys and like Riff Rax say that, and I looked back. I was like, he actually did that. What the heck? That is just weird. But yeah, he's a Temple of Doom, a dab of Sex Panther, and it's on. What the heck, Edver?
All right, with you, ladies and gentlemen, Kingdom of the Spiders, 1977, William Shatner. This versus Arachnophobia. I gotta edge this one out.
I say Arachnophobia. This is for comedy. Arachnophobia is more nerve-wracking.
I disagree totally. I think it's complete opposite, but to give it its justice at some point,
this is more gross.
Arachnophobia.
I'd say this is more gross because they're actually using real spiders. I'd say that's gross.
You get the heebie-jeebies. You absolutely do.
Ugh.
Well, we'll talk about that at some point here on the future on the Xtreme Movie Show with RDV and everybody. So, again, as your host, Rob, I'd like to say thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening, getting the word out about us. Yes, it's obscure. Yes, we love doing it. We've always talked about doing our Shatner Sundays. There's so many things with William that we can do. But check out Impulse, our William Shatner really, really extreme review that we did a year or so ago. That's on the channel, too. You're going to find very few people have
that's actually a rank later after this movie.
Yeah, well, he's got a rack.
We never did explain why they call him Rack. Real quickly, I'll just say he and his brother used to go play pool, and his brother would always, beat him. So he said he called him Rack because he's always making him rack the balls. That's why he's called Rack.
Yeah, I mean, there's great ones out there. I mentioned Food of the Gods
MGD
before we started, and Night of the Lepus, which is giant rabbits, and the guy doing that is not Spock. It's the Doctor from the original Star Trek. There's lots of when animals attack in the 70s. So I mean, there's this obscure side of horror movies that exist that we haven't given enough treatment for.
But at least they had
best for it.
At least they had good beer in this movie. They were drinking High Life.
Miller time. Yeah, it's Miller time, baby. It was popular back then. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. As always, stay extreme.